He's the chillest rapper on the planet, the uncle of hip-hop, the weed-smoking, smooth-talking, meme-making icon we all know as Snoop Dogg. But what if we told you the man behind the laughter has been hiding pain you can't imagine?
I had made a song called Murder Was the Case that was about me losing my life, but before I lost my life.
That behind every laid-back verse is a lifetime of trauma, fear, and grief so heavy that even his own kids had to watch him break? And now his son is finally speaking out.
How does that feel to see your dad receive such a prestigious award tonight?
Because he came from nothing and now he's on top of everything he's doing. And really, I'm just looking at it as motivation for me because, one day I want to be.
Not just about the icon the world sees, but about the father who almost didn't survive his own story. And just when you think this story couldn't get any darker, it does. Before Snoop Dogg became the Dogfather, he was Calvin Cortazar Broadus Jr., a quiet, lanky kid growing up in the heart of Long Beach, California. Born in 1971 to a single mother, Beverly Tate, Snoop learned early what it meant to survive. His father, Vernell Varnado, left when he was just a baby, and his mother worked multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. That meant young Calvin had to grow up fast. By age 12, he was already hustling groceries at Lucky's and delivering newspapers before school. The money helped put food on the table, but it wasn't enough. He tried selling candy, shining shoes, anything to help. But by 14, reality hit hard. In his neighborhood, ambition only took you so far unless you were willing to break the rules. And so Calvin made a choice. He started selling then crack. The risks were high, but the return was immediate. I started selling every kind of narcotic you could think of, he told Vibe in 1993. I was like, F it, a regular job ain't paying this much. But the streets took more than they gave. Getting involved with the Crips might have given him protection and status, but it also put a target on his back. The violence, the police raids, the constant fear, it all came at a cost. When his mother found out, she was devastated. At just 17, Snoop was kicked out of the house. He had no backup plan, no money, no support, just a care, and even that didn't last long. One night, he woke up to find it towed. Inside it, all his clothes, all his drugs, everything. He was officially homeless, a teenage dealer with nothing but a dream and a freestyle. That low point sleeping in borrowed cars, rapping on the streets of Long Beach became the fire that would fuel everything. He started hanging with future collaborators like Nate Dogg and Warren G. They formed 213, named after the local area code, and started making music out of survival. It wasn't fame they were chasing, it was a way out. And somehow, that scrawny kid from the LBC with a lazy drawl and a sharp pen caught Dr. Dre's attention. The rest? That's music history. But don't get it twisted, none of that came easy. Because before the platinum plaques and Hollywood Walk of Fame, Calvin Broadus had to survive hell. Snoop Dogg didn't just live near gang life, he breathed it. Growing up in the east side of Long Beach, the lines between survival and destruction were razor thin. At just 15 years old, he wasn't just a witness to the violence he was handed but not to show off or flex, he was scared. Really scared. I was always scared, he admitted in an interview with Howard Stern. Too scared to back. I just wanted to live. It wasn't about being a gangster. It was about making it to the next day. By then, Snoop was deep in the Crip lifestyle, whether by choice or by environment. In his neighborhood, the gang wasn't just a clique, it was a community. A flawed, dangerous one, but still the only structure many young boys had. But that community came with casualties. One night, when Snoop was still living at home, a car rolled up outside their house. His uncle was the target of a drive-by. Fire erupted. No one was hit, but the trauma carved itself into Snoop's memory. That f***ed me up, he recalled years later. He couldn't sleep for nights. Every creak outside became a threat. Every passing car felt like another attack. Even as his music career began to blossom, the didn't stop. Snoop told the Los Angeles Times that he had lost more than a dozen friends to street violence. Young men, talented men, for nothing. I wish the violence would stop, he said on honest plea from someone who had escaped it physically but never emotionally. And that's the most haunting part. Even when Snoop left the hood didn't leave him. His lyrics carried the pain, his eyes carried the memories. And his silence in interviews about that era, It carried everything else. Because you can't outrun trauma. Not when it lives in your body. Not when it's buried with your friends. Not when the echoes of still ring in your dreams. For Snoop, the gang life wasn't an identity. It was a prison. One he escaped with words, music, and the tiniest sliver of luck. By 1993, Snoop Dogg was poised to become a global superstar. His collaborations with Dr. Dre were setting the West Coast on fire, and his debut album, Doggy Style, was already in motion. But just as the world was tuning in, the unthinkable happened. Snoop found himself staring down a chart. During the summer of that year, Snoop and his bodyguard, McKinley Malik Lee, were involved in a confrontation with a rival gang member in Palms, Los Angeles. What started as a verbal dispute ended with Lee fatally the man. Prosecutors argued that Snoop and Lee had pursued the victim, making him. The defense countered that it was self-defense, pure survival in the face of danger. The case quickly spiraled into a media circus. Snoop was no longer just a rapper, he was a headline, a villain, a symbol of gangster rap on trial. And all the while, he was recording Doggy Style, laying bars in the studio by day, then facing the justice system by night. The trial dragged on for nearly 3 years. In 1996, both Snoop and Lee were acquitted, but the psychological weight didn't lift. Snoop later told Fat Man Scoop, "Somebody's life was lost. My life was changed. This is a real situation." The trauma reshaped his music. Gone was the glorification of violence. In its place came a desire to live, to rise above. The turning point? The birth of his first son, Cord Broadus, in 1994. "Once he was born, I had to reflect back on what I wrote," Snoop said. "I want to live, not I want to." That moment holding his newborn son while facing the possibility of prison forced Snoop to confront a terrifying truth. The street life he once rapped about could have cost him everything: his freedom, his family, his future. As Snoop tried to shift away from violence in his music and focus on being a father, he found himself pulled right back into chaos, this time by the people closest to him. Death Row Records wasn't just a label anymore. It had become a battlefield, and even your friends could turn into enemies overnight. And that's when things started unraveling with Tupac. Tupac Shakur wasn't just another name on Snoop Dogg's playlist, was family. More than a collaborator, Pac was like a brother to Snoop, bonded by pain, purpose, and the pressures of representing the West Coast. It was Snoop who encouraged Suge Knight to bring Tupac to death row after his release from prison. Together, they became a deadly duo in the rap game, unstoppable, untouchable, and fiercely loyal. At least, that's how it started. But by 1996, that bond had fractured. The East Coast, West Coast rivalry was at its peak, and tensions within death row were boiling. During a radio interview, Snoop did the unthinkable belly, spoke respectfully about Biggie Smalls and Sean Diddy, Combs, Pac's sworn enemies. He didn't diss them, he didn't pick a side. But in Tupac's world, neutrality was betrayal. The fallout was immediate. The next time they saw each other, it was on a private jet. Snoop recalled the tension being so thick it was suffocating. No words, no eye contact, just silence and fear. Snoop later admitted he genuinely thought he might not make it off that plane alive. And then came Las Vegas. Just days later, Tupac was down in a drive-by. When Snoop rushed to the hospital to see him, he wasn't greeted by a warrior, he saw a ghost. He had tubes in him, Snoop said on the Impulsive podcast. "When I walked in, I could just feel like he wasn't even there, and I fainted." Imagine that. One of your closest friends, someone you laughed with, toured with, and trusted being in front of you. And your last memory together? A plane ride filled with silence and betrayal. That moment shattered Snoop, not just because he lost a friend, but because he lost the chance to make things right. And that kind of pain doesn't go away. It lingers in the lyrics, in the regrets, and in the silence that follows the fame. Tupac's rocked Snoop to his core, but it also made one thing terrifyingly clear: staying at death row was a gamble with his life. By 1998, the once untouchable label had lost its magic. Dr. Dre had walked away. Tupac was gone. Suge Knight was locked up. And Snoop? He felt like a sitting target. He told the Long Beach Press-Telegram bluntly, "It's telling me that I'm either going to be in jail or I'm going to be nothing." But cutting ties with death row wasn't as simple as packing up and leaving. Suge Knight didn't let people walk away freely. To him, loyalty was everything, and betrayal was blood deep. From behind bars, Suge allegedly waged psychological warfare. According to Snoop's 2006 interview with Rolling Stone, Suge distributed a tape across the prison system and it was Snoop's home address. Even worse, Suge reportedly promised to gift a luxury Benz to anyone who harmed him. He was going to give a man a Benz if he cut my hair, Snoop recalled. It wasn't just paranoia. It was real, deadly real. Snoop began moving like a fugitive, changing locations, surrounding himself with new people, cutting ties with anyone who might be loyal to Suge. In a bold and unexpected pivot, he signed with Master P's No Limit Records, a Southern label that was the complete opposite of Death Row's image. There he found safety, creative control, and most importantly, distance. But even in his so-called freedom, the fear followed him. Old beefs don't dissolve overnight. Death Row had a long reach, and Suge's silence only made it scarier. Snoop didn't just leave a record label, he escaped a regime, and not everyone got out alive. After escaping Death Row and rebuilding his music career, Snoop Dogg had finally reached a place of peace. He was a father, a husband, and now, in 2019, a grandfather. His eldest son, Cordae Broadus, had just welcomed a baby boy, Kai Love. For the Broadus family, it felt like the start of a new legacy. But just 10 days after Kai was born, tragedy struck. Kai Love passed away in Cordae's arms, and in an emotional Instagram post that has since been deleted, Cordae shared the gut-wrenching moment. "He my arms, and that feeling of energy will never leave me." There were no clear public details about what caused the baby's death, and the family remained largely silent. But their silence said everything. For Snoop, this wasn't just the loss of a grandchild, it was a heartbreak layered with generational grief, a child taken before his life began. A reminder that even with fame, fortune, and years of growth, no one is immune to pain. He didn't post many words, just a photo of a rose, a symbol of love, of beauty cut short. Snoop later explained on Red Table Talk that his lashing out at Gayle King over comments about Kobe Bryant's past was rooted in his personal grief at the time. He had been dealing with multiple losses in private, including Kai, and said, "What about when I want to cry? What about when I'm hurt?" In that moment, the world saw past the image, past the and the jokes. They saw a man who had already lost too many and had just lost one more. Kai Love never got to take his first steps, but his brief life left a scar across 3 generations of the Broadus family. And for Snoop, it was another reminder that no matter how far you climb, pain still finds you. If losing a grandson wasn't enough, Snoop Dogg faced an avalanche of grief in the months that followed. In October 2021, his beloved mother, Beverly Tate, passed away. She had been his backbone, his first teacher, and the one who believed in him before the world ever heard his name. On Instagram, he called her his angel and thanked her for everything she gave him. But grief didn't stop there. Just weeks later, his uncle Rio Varnadoknon, not only for his Portland BBQ joint, Rio's Ribs, but also for appearing with Snoop and Martha Stewart on their cooking show, passed away. Rio had been like a second father figure, a source of laughter, wisdom, and grounding. And then, as if the universe hadn't already taken enough, Snoop's cousin Janice died shortly after. 3 funerals, 5 months, and behind the scenes, a broken man who had run out of tears. Snoop posted a quiet tribute, "Say hi to mama and grandma for me," a sentence wrapped in sorrow weighted with finality. These weren't just relatives. These were the people who raised him, who knew Calvin Broadus before Snoop Dogg, and now they were gone. But of all the pain Snoop Dogg has endured, perhaps nothing cut deeper than watching his daughter Corey suffer in silence. Diagnosed with lupus at just 6 years old, Corey's childhood was marked by endless doctor visits, harsh medications, and a body that felt like it was betraying her. The steroids she was prescribed caused rapid weight gain, triggering waves of bullying both online and in person. In a 2021 Instagram video, Corey opened up, "I was overweight from being on steroids, and that just automatically messed with my health. I've always been sad, always depressed." By age 13, she was already grappling with thoughts. By her 20s, a minor car accident caused by her boyfriends and her spiraling again. Feeling overwhelmed and hopeless, she attempted to take her own life in a hotel room. Corey later admitted she often felt like the outsider in her own family, too sick, too different, too broken. But even in her darkest moment, her father never left her side. In a Teen Vogue interview, Corey recalled being in the hospital when Snoop leaned in and said, "You are so damn strong." It was more than encouragement. It was recognition from a father who knew exactly what surviving pain really looked like. In 2004, Snoop Dogg stunned fans when he filed for divorce from his longtime wife, Shantae Broaddus. After years of fame, temptation, and infidelity, he admitted he wanted to live like a pimp again. The spotlight had taken a toll on their relationship, and Snoop seemed ready to throw it all away. But then came Corey's diagnosis. At just 6 years old, their youngest daughter was battling lupus, an incurable autoimmune disease that would require constant care, emotional strength, and unconditional love. In that moment, everything changed. Snoop and Shantae realized they couldn't afford to fall apart. Their daughter needed both of them, and for the first time in years, they began working together again, not just as parents, but as partners. "Corey's lupus showed us we need to be together forever," Snoop told People magazine. They canceled the divorce, started therapy, and rebuilt their foundation from scratch. Snoop swapped club nights for hospital visits, ego for empathy. And what he rediscovered was the woman who had stood beside him long before the fame. "That's the love of my life," he told GQ in 2021. "She ain't never did no wrong. Everything wrong with this relationship has always been me." Their daughter's illness became a wake-up call, and ultimately the glue that held the family together. For decades, Snoop Dogg embodied the image of cool and shaken, unbothered, untouchable. But behind the charisma was a man slowly peeling back layers of pain. As he got older, Snoop began speaking more candidly about something hip-hop rarely addressed in his early years: mental health. In an interview with Hip Hollywood, he said, "I cry. I'm sad a lot. I have problems and issues. I'm human." It was a powerful admission from someone who once wore toughness like armor. He wasn't just being honest though, was breaking generational silence. Snoop's growth wasn't just internal. He sought therapy individually and with his wife Shantae. On the Pivot podcast, he challenged outdated ideas about masculinity, stating, "There's no such thing as being weak for asking for help." He began cutting toxic people out of his life, focusing on healing, reflection, and building healthier habits. He swapped bravado for vulnerability, and by doing it all publicly, he made space for other black men and especially other rappers to follow suit. But despite his growth, the world hasn't always given him grace. Judgment still lingers. Tabloids still chase the old Snoop. But the man who once ran from pain is now leading by example. Because in his words and his action, she's proving that healing is the new strength. Today, Snoop Dogg is a household name with a family-friendly image. He cooks with Martha Stewart, voices animated characters, and sells smokeless fire pits with a smile. But his son, Corey Broaddus, sees beyond the brand. He knows the man behind the fame, the one who's buried friends, survived violence, and carried pain no camera ever caught. Cord once wrote, "He my arms and that feeling will never leave me." He was talking about his infant son, Kai. But in many ways, he was also talking about his father watching Snoop grieve, fight, and keep going. Because sometimes survival runs in the bloodline. So now we ask you, what do you see when you look at Snoop Dogg? A rapper, a meme, or a man who's buried more pain than we'll ever understand? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because if this is what Snoop lived through, just imagine what he's still hiding. And remember, sometimes the strongest ones are the ones who've been broken the most.